The air in the chamber was heavy with formality, the kind that veiled hidden intentions. Captain Mira Reynolds sat stiff-backed, her sharp eyes studying every flicker of movement across the table. The Zynak envoys, adorned in their ceremonial armor, spoke in clipped tones, their words polished but hollow. Mira's instinct warned her. The Zynak never brokered peace without coercion, and today's meeting felt more like a staged spectacle than genuine diplomacy. Commander Zyler, the Zynak delegation's leader, leaned forward. His scaled hand gestured expansively as he spoke, his voice dripping with faux sincerity. Humanity's presence along our borders grows increasingly unsettling. We must establish terms to avoid misunderstandings. Mira didn't flinch. Her voice was even, sharp as a blade. Humanity respects boundaries. But let me remind you, Commander, misunderstandings often come from those who refuse to honor agreements. The chamber fell into a tense silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. Mira's gaze swept the room, lingering on the attendants stationed near the walls. Their postures were too rigid, their eyes too focused. Something was off. She noted the faint glint of metal near one attendant's hand, a weapon, partially concealed. Her muscles tensed. Diplomacy was always a gamble, but here, surrounded by potential hostiles, her margin for error was non-existent. Still, Mira knew better than to act prematurely. Instead, she shifted her weight slightly, ensuring her emergency beacon was within reach. Zyler's lips curled into a semblance of a smile. Perhaps we speak too bluntly. Let us agree that peace is beneficial for both our species. But peace requires trust, Captain. Before Mira could respond, movement from the corner of her eye confirmed her fears. The faint sound of a weapon charging was the only warning she had. Acting on pure instinct, she dove to the side just as a streak of plasma seared through the air where she'd been sitting. The chair disintegrated in a burst of smoke and sparks. The room erupted into chaos. Zynak guards surged forward, their weapons drawn, as the envoys scrambled for cover. Mira rolled behind a table, her hand slamming down on the emergency beacon. A faint pulse against her palm signaled that her crew had received the distress call. She wasted no time. Spotting the dropped weapon of the would-be assassin, Mira lunged for it. Her fingers closed around the alien weapon, its unfamiliar weight a reminder of the odds she faced. Plasma fire hissed past her as she crouched, using the table for cover. Her first shot was experimental, aimed at one of the guards advancing toward her. The weapon fired with a satisfying burst, striking its target and sending him sprawling. Mira's eyes narrowed as she adjusted her grip. The weapon's power was impressive, but required precision, something she had in abundance. As the guards closed in, Mira moved with ruthless efficiency. She fired methodically, her shots disabling rather than killing. She knew the real fight was ahead. Survival here was merely the first step. The Zynak had underestimated her, and she intended to make them regret it. Her gaze darted toward the room's exit, but the route was blocked. Instead, she focused on the ventilation shaft near the ceiling. It was a gamble, but gambles had kept her alive before. Using a nearby console for leverage, she climbed swiftly, ignoring the searing heat of plasma bolts streaking past her. The shaft was tight and stifling, the metal walls pressing in on her as she crawled. Sweat dripped down her face, but her movements remained steady. Each second was a test of endurance, a reminder of the stakes. The Zynak wouldn't give her a second chance. Finally, she reached a maintenance panel and forced it open. Dropping into an empty corridor, Mira took a moment to steady her breathing. The hangar bay wasn't far, but she knew better than to relax. The Zynak had made their move. Now it was her turn. The sound of the hatch sealing behind her was a lifeline, but Captain Mira Reynolds didn't pause to catch her breath. Her boots pounded against the deck as she sprinted toward the bridge of the Resolve. The corridor lights flickered red, signaling the crew's readiness for action. Mira's face was calm, but her mind was racing, piecing together the betrayal, the implications, and most importantly, the next move. The bridge doors slid open, and her officers turned to her with a mixture of relief and determination. Lieutenant Harris, her second-in-command, stepped forward. "Captain, your signal came through. Are you injured?" Mira shook her head. "I'm fine. The Zynak tried to take me out. It was a trap all along." Her voice was cold, controlled. "They've made their intentions clear. This isn't about diplomacy. It's about sending a message. We'll make sure they understand ours." Harris nodded sharply, and the crew moved into action. Commands flowed seamlessly as the bridge buzzed with focused energy. Mira approached the central console, her fingers flying over the controls as she pulled up a schematic of the Zynak vessel and their patrol routes. The room was filled with the quiet hum of calculations and the murmur of tactical discussions. "We have the element of surprise," Mira began addressing her crew. "The Zynak think they've silenced me, and they'll assume we'll retreat. Instead, we'll take the fight to them. Their arrogance is their weakness." The crew responded with silent, unwavering confidence. They had served under Mira long enough to trust her instincts, no matter how risky her plans appeared. Tapping into the ship systems, Mira began to formulate a counterstrike. The Zynak had exposed themselves by making the first move, and Mira planned to exploit their assumptions. "We'll hit their outpost at Sector 12G, she said, her tone decisive. "It's lightly defended, but strategically significant. A precise strike will destabilize their operations and remind them who they're dealing with." Harris raised an eyebrow. "Sector 12G is close to their central command. If they detect us—" "They won't," Mira interrupted. "We'll use the asteroid field for cover. The Resolve was designed for stealth, and we'll make sure they never see us coming." As the crew began preparations, Mira allowed herself a moment to reflect. She hadn't risen to her position by playing it safe. Humanity's place in the galaxy depended on leaders willing to take calculated risks, and she was determined to prove that her species wasn't just another target for alien empires to intimidate. Her focus returned to the task at hand. The ship's stealth systems activated, cloaking them as they approached the Zynak-controlled region. Mira studied every detail of the plan, ensuring there were no gaps. The Resolve would strike swiftly, efficiently, and without mercy. The bridge settled into a quiet tension as the ship slipped into enemy space. Mira glanced at her crew, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of their consoles. "Remember," she said, her voice steady, "this isn't just about survival. It's about showing them that humanity doesn't bow. We strike hard, we strike fast, and we make them regret the day they underestimated us." A faint ripple of agreement moved through the room. Mira turned her attention back to the viewport, her expression resolute. The Zynak had made a critical error, and she would ensure it was their last. The Resolve drifted silently through the asteroid field, its cloaking systems rendering it invisible to the Zynak scanners. Captain Mira Reynolds stood at the tactical console, her gaze fixed on the holographic display of the Zynak outpost. The station was small but critical, a refueling and communications hub that connected their fleet to the larger command network. Disabling, it would send shockwaves through their operations, buying humanity precious time. Her voice was calm and deliberate as she addressed the infiltration team. "This mission is about precision. In and out before they know what hit them. No unnecessary risks, no heroics. The objective is to cripple their command network and get out alive." "Understood." The team nodded, their faces resolute. Mira had handpicked them for their expertise: engineers, demolitions experts, and seasoned Marines. She trusted each of them implicitly, but she knew the weight of the risk they were taking. The shuttle detached from the Resolve, gliding toward the outpost under the cover of debris. Mira piloted it herself, her hands steady on the controls as she guided them through the asteroid field. The faint hum of the engines was the only sound, the silence a stark contrast to the tension crackling through the air. As they approached the outpost, the team moved with practiced efficiency. They breached the station's airlock using a compact plasma cutter, slipping inside undetected. The interior was dimly lit, the corridors lined with sleek, alien architecture. Mira motioned for the team to move forward, their steps silent on the metallic floor. The first target was the communications hub. Mira and an engineer, Lieutenant Chun, worked quickly to disable the station's long-range transmitters. Chun crouched by the console, his fingers flying over the alien interface as he bypassed the encryption. Mira stood guard, her weapon trained on the corridor ahead. A faint sound caught her attention, the rhythmic clank of approaching footsteps. Zynak guards. Mira signaled the team, and they melted into the shadows, positioning themselves strategically. As the guards rounded the corner, Mira fired a single, precise shot, taking out the leader. The others hesitated, giving her team the opening they needed. Within seconds, the guards were neutralized, their bodies crumpling silently to the floor. With the transmitters disabled, the team moved to the power core. This was the heart of the operation. Destroying it would render the station inoperable, cutting off the Zynak fleet from vital resources. The demolitions expert, Sergeant Vega, planted charges along the core's structure, her movements swift and practiced. Mira's earpiece crackled. Charges set, Captain. 3 minutes to detonation. Understood, Mira replied. Everyone fall back to the shuttle. The team retraced their steps, the distant hum of the station's systems masking their movements. As they reached the airlock, alarms blared. The Zynak had discovered their presence. Mira cursed under her breath, motioning for the team to move faster. Guards swarmed the corridor, their weapons blazing. Mira and the Marines provided cover, returning fire with deadly precision. Plasma bolts scorched the walls, but the team pressed forward, their training and discipline carrying them through. They reached the shuttle just as the first explosion rocked the station. The force of the blast sent shockwaves through the structure, throwing the guards off balance. Mira pulled the hatch closed and launched the shuttle, the engines roaring to life as they sped away. From the viewport, they watched as the station erupted in a cascade of fire and debris. Mira's expression was grim but satisfied. The mission was a success, but she knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had struck back, and the Zynak would soon realize they had underestimated their prey. The Resolve sailed through the void, its hull still streaked with the burn marks of plasma fire. Captain Mira Reynolds stood at the central viewport, watching the distant remnants of the Zynak outpost drift in the vastness of space. The station's destruction had sent shockwaves through enemy lines, and the repercussions were already beginning to ripple across the sector. Behind her, Lieutenant Harris approached, his voice low. Captain, incoming reports from our listening posts. The Zynak have pulled back several patrols along their border. They're regrouping. Mira didn't turn, her gaze fixed on the stars. Good. Let them regroup. They've been reminded that humanity isn't as weak as they assumed. Harris hesitated for a moment before continuing. The crew is debriefing now. Morale is high. But the team is asking if this means war. Mira finally turned, her expression unreadable. The Zynak declared war the moment they tried to assassinate me. But we won't play their game. Humanity's strength isn't just in how we fight. It's in how we endure. If they push, we'll push back harder. But we won't be the ones to escalate. Not yet. Harris nodded, seeming reassured by her resolve. As he returned to his station, Mira allowed herself a moment to breathe. The mission had been a success, but the weight of command was always heavier after the fight was over. Every decision carried consequences, and while the victory had been decisive, she knew the Zynak wouldn't forget the lesson they had just learned. The quiet hum of the bridge was broken by a message coming through the comms. Captain, this is engineering. Repairs are underway. We'll have full systems operational within the hour. Good work, Mira replied. Prioritize the stealth systems. We may need to move without being seen sooner than expected. She stepped away from the viewport, walking the length of the bridge. The crew worked diligently at their stations, their movements precise and confident. Each of them bore the marks of the recent battle, whether in the form of singed uniforms or tired eyes, but their resolve was unshaken. Mira felt a swell of pride. This was humanity at its best, resilient, resourceful, and determined to survive. In the briefing room, the infiltration team sat in silence, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. Mira entered, her presence commanding immediate attention. "You all performed flawlessly," she began, her voice steady. "Every risk you took, every decision you made, it saved lives today. You proved that when humanity is pushed, we push back smarter and harder than anyone expects." Sergeant Vega, still dusted with debris from the mission, leaned forward. "And the Zynak? What's their next move?" Mira met her gaze. "They'll hesitate. For the first time, they'll think twice about engaging us directly. That's our advantage. They see us as unpredictable, dangerous. And that's exactly how we need them to see us." As the debrief concluded, Mira returned to her quarters. The room was sparse, functional, a reflection of the discipline she demanded of herself. She sank into the chair by her console, her hands steepled as she replayed the mission in her mind. Every decision weighed heavily, every loss a reminder of the stakes.